your best sales reps will be your worst offenders.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I was a little bit different, but I learned that in being a sniper.
Mm.
Right? So I learned the importance of data and all the little tweaks, and I started to like that side because it was interesting to me. So then I applied that to my sales, and like I was able to dial everything in, you know what I mean? Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Coffee is for Closers. I'm here today with Big Luke, and we're gonna be going over a cool thing that he's building, and a bunch of other stuff to do with calendar management and coming up with a singular source of truth when it comes to the data of salespeople and all the filthy reps that won't do their data. But yeah.
You're gonna make that easy for them.
Yeah, give us a background.
My background?
Of why you're smarter than me and most of the people listening.
Oh, that's a troubling thought. I have a technology background, been building tech companies my whole career, been involved in some pretty exciting businesses over the years, and some unmitigated disasters along the way as well. Today I run a studio called Superluminal, so we build all sorts of really interesting tech for people, mostly in AI at the moment. There's a ton of AI. And then we also have our own internal projects as well.
Okay.
And that's where the project we're talking about today comes from.
Yeah, exactly. What are some of the projects that you've worked on? Can you talk about them? Or?
Yeah, for sure.
G14 classified.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've built some great software for trading, trading platforms. There's one where we're doing AI analysis of 40,000 companies per day. And sort of putting it through the lens of value investing and making some assessments of each company. We're doing a lot of work in education, trying to map between different syllabuses and educational content, and it's very difficult to try and do that with classical computing, but AI has a really strong hand to play with that. We're doing some other interesting stuff for sales teams for one of our clients, where we're sort of consolidating all of this useful data around leads and projects and so on, and then turning them into these little customized podcasts that you can listen to. So while you're driving to your sales meeting, you can be sort of getting briefed. So some of the synthetic AI stuff that's coming out is incredible. So
synthetic AI?
Yeah, synthetic voice AI. So it's sort of a long way from what you might think of as the sort of robotic sounding stuff from back in the day. It's really hard to tell that it's not a real voice. And so being able to kind of get briefed on things as you're driving to a meeting, our thinking with AI is that there's a lot of concern around people's jobs getting replaced and so on. And I think a lot of that will be figured out over time. But I think in the meantime, there are a lot of excellent opportunities to help enhance human relationships rather than diminish them or replace them. Yeah.
I think I know when I hear AI, because in the space that I'm in, I think it's just a lot of people who have chat GPT prompts. Yeah. Right? So when you say, so the thing we're sort of talking about, and the thing that we're kind of doing together is this calendar system that can read everything and do everything, and there's an AI component to that. But what is the difference between something like a real AI system that does, this kind of stuff, and just someone who can run a prompt on GPT? I don't really know that much about it. Right? So I obviously do, but for the people at home, explain the kind of, are there different types of AIs, or is it all kind of running off the same thing?
There are.
Large language models and stuff like that?
I think I'll sort of avoid going too deep into that topic, but suffice to say that conversational AI, which is ChatGPT and things like that, is one type, and then I think the best way to think about it is in terms of how you interact with it. It's not always typing, and obviously now you can increasingly speak with them verbally as well. But it's also around the sorts of data that you put into these systems and the data and insights that you can get out of them again. So I think that, without getting into the technical delineations between those systems, I think that's a good way to think about it. I think for a lot of people, AI equals chatbot, or some permutation of that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas, with the system we'll be talking about today, you see AI at work doing the heavy lifting, trying to figure out insights, and then the way that that's output is not conversational AI. It's fully integrated into the product in a way that the end user doesn't need to kind of see behind the curtains of how that's being figured out. It's not relevant to them doing their job better. We're just giving you the punchy insights to do your job better.
Which is essentially what computers did. You know what I mean? Like the first time, it's like, instead of...
Yeah, you don't need to know how it does it. It's
I don't know
just,
how a computer works.
Yeah.
I don't know how my phone works. I remember I made them, my dad's a bit of a boffin, right? Like he was a kind of an inventor, tech guy. He was the first person on the internet in Australia. So he was contracted by the Australian Patent Office to figure out how to get the patents from the US. So he hooked up an acoustic coupler with a fax machine and then managed to piggyback off internet through the fax network in the US, right? And then basically had a fax machine that was just live printing every patent request as it came in.
Amazing.
Which is kind of an interesting way to do it, right? With that old fax paper, you know what I mean? Well, it cost a fortune.
Yeah.
I remember that stuff was back. But yeah, that's what he did. And he invented a bunch of other stuff. But I remember I made the mistake once of going like, how's a phone work? And he was like, well.
Sit down, son.
And it was like, an hour later, I very much regretted it. But I know how a phone works. So, but yeah. So like, I think it's one of those things, right? It just makes, I always see it as like, it's just going to make everything, like it should make everything better and more creative because you're taking out the menial.
Yep, I think that's right. And a lot of the stuff that we're building is kind of put through that prism of, rather than just saying, okay, well, we've got this new shiny object, how do we just use it in everything? It's how do we look at the commercial objectives that we're trying to achieve and then leverage that technology in service of that, right? Because I think when you do it the other way around, God knows a lot of capital gets torched just building fluffy stuff. I think blockchain is unfortunately an example of that as well, where people just got so enamored with blockchain that they just wanted to build stuff with it, rather than saying, well, what are we trying to achieve? What's the best technology to do that?
Gary Vee just yawned at everyone to buy NFTs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Gary Vee should go back to Wine Library. That was his prime days, man. I love that stuff,
Yeah, all right, so what are we, what's this new product? Explain it to me.
Okay, so Revbase is, I guess, working for sales professionals, trying to help them, I guess, fill in some of the gaps in some of the products that are already out there today.
Yeah.
I think maybe one preliminary thing I would say before we get into the specifics of that is, obviously there are a ton of sales tools out there. Unfortunately, I think that there are some really key components of what people need to be doing that are currently left to boring, repetitive tasks for humans.
Yes.
Right. And so that's where I think you and I have really started to meld minds on that and say, well, how do we find those boring tasks and sort of pluck them out and make it trivially easy? Which is better for the teams because like no one wants to do those jobs, and it's better for the management and the executive who need the data coming out of it. So having now talked around it, what the actual features that we're looking at are things like making sure that sales teams are able to really easily update the statuses of each of their calls, make sure that they can understand where the gaps are in their calendars and what the opportunity cost is of those gaps. And then using that as more of an input into what is actually an AI system is start to generate insights that we can feed back into those teams so that they can optimize their scheduling and their calendars around what's going to get them the best results.
Yeah. And a lot of this came from the fact that like we met through Ben and I think I was just complaining. I think it was like, so like having run a lot of sales teams now, it's getting close to 100, I'm pretty sure. And I'm running the biggest one I've ever run right now, which we have 12,000 sales calls in the month of May, right? Across a number of different like lead partners. So you've got like slightly different marketing coming from different places, coming into like a singular thing, having none of the systems are really structured to kind of handle all of that, and so you have like 2 or 3 systems running at once, all of which sort of like don't want to play nice with each other that much, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they'll play nice with other stuff, but not with each other, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm sure is by design. The same way when you plug a Rode mic into a Sony, it buzzes for no reason whatsoever. Right?
It's a feature.
Yeah, it's a feature, right? But yeah, and so like, what you end up with is like, if you want to get all the data, you have to militantly demand, your salespeople to do it, which is unlikely because they're contractors. So you really can't even, it's hard to tell them even to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because you start flirting with the lines of employment versus contractor versus whatever, right? Because really you're just asking for an outcome.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, so then what you end up doing is you end up kind of like not knowing the truth. And then you end up guessing. And there's a lot of tropes within the sales organizations, which is like, don't book out more than 72 hours because they'll no-show. And I believe that to be true. However, if you were to ask me a lie detector, I've never seen data. I just think it's true.
Yeah, yeah.
And like, it was just today that I thought, well, I've never actually seen that that's true.
You just take it to be the case.
I just feel like it is because it makes sense. And I'm like, people no-show, and then I go, they're booked out too far, right?
Yeah.
Right? And I like, and for me, when I was a sales rep full time, I tracked like every day. And so I knew when my revenue times were, but I'm sort of a unicorn sales rep in that way. And like, there are not many around when it comes to like really kind of understanding their diary, but I had kids and I didn't want to waste time. So to me, that made sense, but most people aren't going to do that. And then when you have a team of 100, there's no way you could do that. I mean, you know, and so like,
and also those truisms are very personal to either that individual or the product that they're selling or the team that they're a part of or
the
whatever
content in which it's being sold.
Exactly. So, I think that there are obviously some universally accepted best practices, but I think a lot of that stuff where, especially when you're already a high performing team and you're trying to like get to that next level, there's very little data associated with this.
Yeah.
And going back to your sort of first point there, what you're describing is true of so many industries where you've got these sort of big software platforms that people use that do a lot of what they need, but not everything. And so teams are forced to use multiple systems because there's this sort of competitive overlap between them. They have to have API support, but they don't really want to play that nicely in the sandpit together. And so you get stuck with these semi-integrated things. What will generally happen if you look at the history of how technology markets evolve is that you end up with some sort of aggregation solution, you know? And so that's essentially what we're talking about for sales.
Apple TV.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. But then you can see it like, oh, this is a rabbit hole. But I mean, Amazon is now trying to be their own aggregation play because they've got other streaming services aggregated into Amazon Prime. And, you know, like these things will continually re-aggregate.
Cable TV again.
Yeah,
Boop,
yeah exactly.
Right?
But yeah, I mean, I think that's, your lived experience is exactly that for these sales platforms where now what we're saying is, well, in spite of the fact that there's these quite mature products, there are really significant gaps in their feature sets. They kind of talk to each other, but not that well. And then even if you do get them to play okay together, you still haven't solved those gaps. And so that's what Revbase is all about, is saying, let's pull these different data sources together, create this single source of truth, make it really easy for the teams to do what they need to do so that the management and the sales guys are kind of all, you know, not rubbing each other the wrong way. And also provide really useful, actionable feedback into those teams of saying, well, based on historical performance, we predict that you would get an X% bump in your conversions if you move this type of meeting to these periods or whatever it is.
Because for example, like, you know, you might have a daily sales huddle at 11 a.m. every day, but then, you know, like you might have extremely high show-up rates in between the hours of 10 to 3. And then terrible show-up rates outside of that. And it's like, well, your
opportunity cost is really high at that time.
It's like you got your entire team on a meeting. Like in times where like it's the highest revenue generation, you know? And so, and then it's like, well, you know, and then people the problem is that people have a tendency, and this is one thing that like as a sales manager and running sales teams, I don't do, and it's the reason why I've sort of outperformed most people, is because I look for reasons to not make changes, whereas everyone looks for reasons to make changes, generally speaking. So like, you know, if it's a holiday coming up and a large group of people don't show up, I would never change process because of that. I would have a mitigation strategy in place. I'm not going to change a system that fundamentally works because of an outlying particular thing, right?
You got to be careful for false negatives.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So, but people want to change things. And what ends up happening in organizations over time is it's a series of people who make changes. And nobody reverts back to simplicity, which is generally what people need. So like, if you can see the actual source of truth and be able to, because there are so many variables that like, if I wanted to see everything I wanted to see on a sales team, like I would have to hire 7 or 8 people to look at one particular line to do the manual reconciliations, right? If it's like, if I have 100 sales staff or even 5 sales staff, what lead source, what time of day, you know, like what area, or because people in the Midwest in the US act totally differently than people in Florida.
Yeah, and also just to your earlier anecdote, things like, when did I book this meeting in?
Yeah.
Because that's another dimension to,
a
meeting time is not a static thing. Like there's the input to that and obviously the output of it. And trying to aggregate all of that and then discern insights from it it's huge.
Yeah, and all the booking systems talk and stuff like that. I remember when I was in fitness, like if somebody opted in at 2 a.m., I knew that they were likely going to be a crap lead. Right? Because I was like, this is weight loss.
They're up late questioning their lives.
They've seen a weight loss ad. The guy's sitting there with a beer and his dick in his hand going like, I hate myself, right? Yeah. Next day he's like, oh, I'm a champion, right? You know what I mean? So I was like, okay. And then it was actually what was fundamentally weird was that people always want people to have these like application forms and they want really in-depth ones. And I found that my personal anecdote is the more someone outlays on that, the less likely they are to buy. Whereas like everyone would argue the opposite, but like I've tracked it personally, but it's only an n=1. But so I stopped reading them. I stopped having anything to do with it. I thought that it gave me a bias at that, but also if someone's willing to just pour their heart out on this application form, that's such an emotional decision. And most emotional things are like if you can't, if you were to call that person within 5 minutes, you could probably get them. But a day later, you know, like they've tried to resolve that, internally.
Yeah, that's really interesting insight.
There's no way that I could get that insight though. It was just because like anecdotally, right? Like I thought that. But with an actual system that saw that stuff, then you could pull that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and I think the other interesting thing about Revbase is that it doesn't preclude you from doing your own creative solutions to things to see how they work. Yeah. But if you do that, let's say you go, you know what, bugger it, I'm just going to try doing this particular kind of call at 7:30 and just see what happens. Like maybe that's a bad example, but let's just run with that. Then you can do that and then track that data through the system, and then the insights that you receive will give you some kind of feedback loop on that without you having to do the heavy lifting of crunching all those numbers. Yeah. And it'll do it in a way that's consistent with the way that the rest of Revbase works, so that you'll have a comparative analysis between, well, here's what you're normally doing, and then here's this other experimental corner, if you like.
Yeah. And then the other thing is like getting sales reps to, like as from being a sales rep, it's like generally speaking, like you'll either like they'll have a VA kind of following you around doing everything for you, right? Or you're going to be asked to update multiple systems usually. So remember, like I was updating the CRM and doing end of days and doing end of weeks. And it's like,
no one wants to do that.
It's like no one wants to do it. And then it's like, salespeople are not that way inclined. Like salespeople are generally people who are high risk tolerant people. That's kind of how they work. And they're more creative, and they generally either care an awful lot about what people think of them, or they don't care at all. That's the two sort of avatars. Like, I don't give a fuck, or like, please accept me for who I am. And that's why they make decent salespeople, right? Because they lean out or lean in, right? The hard other way. So like, but they're not administration people. High levels of ADHD in sales reps, from what I've seen, like high levels of dyslexia, because there's no sales degree. There's no requirement for school. So it is a purely my ability to talk to people. So generally speaking, there are people who have, the most successful sales reps are generally people who have a odd childhood, right? Are neurodivergent in some way, and like, just don't have a proclivity to do administration. Interesting. And so like by asking them to do complex administration, you are like your best sales reps will be your worst offenders.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I was a little bit different, but I learned that in being a sniper. right? So I learned the importance of data and all the little tweaks, and I started to like that side because it was interesting to me. So then I applied that to my sales, and like I was able to dial everything in. You know what I mean?
But I think also it sounds like the dialing in the data of sniping is different, but you could kind of align the admin forms you have to do in sales with, like, you could associate those two things together, even though they're completely different kinds of admin. But
well, like it gives you what to fix. Right? So
the way I think about that, I guess zooming out a little from this particular product and just as a general observation around product development is there needs to be a give and a take. If you just ask of your user and you don't give them anything in return, then people are going to churn. They don't want to do stuff if there's no reciprocal benefit from it. And so I think we've found a really constructive balance there with Revbase, where you're first of all, the tool is just helping you not have to juggle all these different tools. You shouldn't have to enter the same piece of information twice. That's already beneficial. But then in addition to that, in providing the reporting and so forth that's useful for management and executive and so forth, it's also giving you the insights that help you ultimately make more money.
Yeah.
So if you just want to be purely transactional about it, that I would argue is a worthwhile trade.
Absolutely.
Do the admin, make more money.
Yeah. And the admin's easy. It's like the calendar's
Super
open.
easy.
So instead of having like your Google Calendar open, right? Or your Microsoft Calendar, whatever, you just have this open.
Yes.
And you can see everything you're doing, and you can go through and just like update your status within the call, and it's good to go, and then it will just kind of do its thing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then you're periodically getting insights around how you might tweak subsequent meeting times and things like that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because like, especially like if we can, if it like an event, because it's going to give the information that's given, right? And a lot of you can in a lot of the booking systems and CRMs, you can attach lead sources and stuff like that, and so like having the ability to sort of just take it all in is so important, because like marketing is getting harder and harder and harder. And like, there's a heavy consolidation in the online space at the moment, because, COVID was such a boom, right, for the online space, that now it's like, there's a bit of normalization happening, and online advertising is getting more expensive because there's more competition, but also like the methods are, becoming, people become numb to it, right? Marketing exists to interrupt the pattern of life. And if the pattern of life includes a lot of marketing, then that just becomes white noise.
It's quite poetically said, I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm sure someone else has said it at some stage, but that's what it is. It's, And so, Facebook and Meta and all that kind of stuff, it's just billboard advertising on the highway of the internet. That's all it is. You know what I mean? So it's like, how do you, how do you stand out in that world?
Well, I think also on the product side, I think a lot about the sort of cognitive burden that you put on people by them using your product. And the best amount in most cases, obviously there are exceptions, is close to none. And so the best interface design, or however you want to look at that, is that it's so intuitive that you're not really even that conscious of the fact that you're using a system. It's just like, I've got the information I need, I'm doing the tasks I'm doing, everything's where it should be, and it feels intuitive, and it's in support of me doing the task that I need to do. And I think that we've got that to a really, you're never quite at that ideal, but I think we're doing a pretty damn good job with Revbase, where you can just sit there and you can do your job, and you're not ideally that conscious of all these tools that are kind of plugged into this in the background. You're just like rocking and rolling, getting your job done.
Because I've used it's just such a pain to be able to and it's funny, like if you don't know what you're doing, like then you can see the insights that whatever CRM gives you, and you think you're fine. But it's like when you actually know what you're doing, like you're like, I don't need this, like I need other stuff. I need to know more, because I know, like, all the interactions that happen with each other. And so it's, it's kind of like the more you learn about it, the more like information you need to make a really good decision.
Yeah.
And so like having the ability, a lot of people think they have bad show up rates, but it's like, maybe you don't. Maybe it's just that you don't know when people show up.
Yeah. And by the way, this is a really great example of where AI comes into its own. So I lived in Silicon Valley for many years, and at one point I ran a data science team. And one of the things that we had to contend with is you would have all these different stakeholders asking you questions about stuff. And the pushback you had to give quite often was like, what action would you take based on the results of this? Because if I'm going to go get a data scientist to spend a couple of days churning through zillions of database records, then to distill this down to a statistic, what are you going to do with that? Because if it's just interesting to know, then I'm sorry, I can't help you.
Yeah.
What's great about AI is that you can put these huge data sets in, and often it will find inferences that are really non-obvious, where you're not even. Part of the problem is just thinking about the right question to even ask. You know what I mean? Whereas the way these AIs are evolving now, you don't even have to ask that. You can just put it in a more general form and say, where are some key insights out of this?
Yeah.
The stuff that we're seeing Revbase produce is pretty amazing in that. I mean, I'm involved in building it, and I'm still shocked sometimes by what it comes out of it.
Yeah.
Where it's just building these little correlations and so on that a human just wouldn't pick up.
Yeah. And so many of these, like HubSpot, for example, I think it's great. It's a great tool. Like in terms of like bang for buck CRM for most businesses, I think it's probably the best, right?
Yeah.
Salesforce is like just a giant Lego box. It's like you're going to spend 90% of your revenue on it, right? And then like Close is good for some things, and there's all these other ones. But in terms of like, GHL is good for some things, but like it's like the poor man's version of HubSpot, right? Don't sue me, GHL. They're suing ClickFunnels right now. No, ClickFunnels is suing them. Yeah.
Someone's suing someone.
Someone's suing someone, right? But yeah, so but like you have to create the dashboard. I have to tell it what I want to see. And then it has to be set up in order, like I have to go and set it up in order to do that. So I'm just connecting dots, you know what I mean? But only the dots I know how to connect. And a lot of the time, like, there's a rise of fractional sales management because, like, if you're a company even doing a few $1 million a year, $5 million a year with a good net profit, you can't afford the guy that can actually give you the insight.
Yeah.
Because not many people know how to do that. It's funny, I was talking to a guy today, a really good friend of mine named Will, and he's on an account right now. It's at about 1.5 million a month, and it will be at 4 very soon. It's going like that. It's a hot offer, happens every now and then. And I ran a hot offer a while ago. We took it to $3 million a month in 6 months. And today he went to me and he goes, I just figured out what you were doing. And this is about 2.5, 3 years ago. And he goes, I see now why that was able to happen, because he's now had years more of experience, and I've told him a ton of stuff. He's a great guy. He's super smart. He's done a lot of stuff now outside of what I've done with him. And he was like, "Oh, I see what you were doing. I see why they could never," because they had an internal team and they desperately wanted to fire me because we were way more expensive, right? But they couldn't figure out, even paying their team 1/3 what they were paying our team. They couldn't figure out how to get the numbers to work out to fire us. Right? It took them 9 months to figure out how to do it, and by that time, it was fucking crypto bull run done. But right, so yeah, like all those little tiny tweaks and stuff like that, and like where you see like all the correlations, like okay, if we do that, that will happen. If we do that, that will happen. Right? Like a lot of people don't realize that, like close rate is just an interesting metric. It's not actually like a reflection of much, because I can double a team's close rate instantly. Like if you said double this team's close rate, I go, okay, done. And all I have to do is make it a bit harder to get on a sales call. Just add friction, that's it, done. Yeah. And all of a sudden it's like, hey look, it's like, but I have less sales. No, I doubled your close rate. You didn't say double your sales. You said double the close rate, right? And then I could instantly come in with a team that's closing 80% and go, boom, like that, turn down to 20, like that, right? Like close rate is a lagging indicator. It's a skill-based thing, but it's also an environment thing.
Well,
right?
It needs to be contextualized with everything else.
Exactly. And so the way that I've always run it is I've got opportunity and I've got quality. the whole point of a sales team is to have the most amount of the best leads available. So it's like, if there aren't many leads available, you're going to speak to everyone. That's the way it's going to be, because opportunity is king. Because if we have a 1% chance of closing someone, it's better than a 100% chance of closing no one.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to fill you up with people and go, sorry, champ, your closer's going to suck this month. And then at least that feeds revenue, right? Which then they have opportunity, they can create pipeline. Then from there, we kind of dial it back up as we go. There was one account that I was running, they were spending about $15,000, $20,000 a day US on ads, and we were overrun with people. And every day, about twice a day, we were changing the questions on the application form to match the demand. We were just like that, like just playing this game all day long.
To increase friction dynamically, is that?
Yeah, every now and then I'd go, do you have $30,000 cash to spend in the next 72 hours on this? Right? And they would go, people said yes, straight through. Everyone who said like, there was like 3 or 4 different categories of like thing that they could answer, and I had conditional logic all set up. So if you answered this, you'd go here, here, or here, 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 or here, and I could just switch it all around. But the volume was so high that we were switching it multiple times per day, depending on how stacked people were and how fast we could get new people on, stuff like that, right?
Wow.
Like not many people know how to do that.
Yeah.
Most people would just set the hard qualifier and go, but like then that's not going to last forever. So when you get everyone used to that, the moment you back it off, your team shits the bed and it's done, right? Like, and then you've ruined the opportunity. So just keeping everybody full, but not full, like with the easiest all the time, you mitigate stuff, but like, that's such a heavy manual process. But like I was saying, the guys who can do that are few and far between, right? And like, they're very expensive. And so fractional management has become a real thing that's very helpful for a lot of businesses, because you can get a guy, like you do fractional CTO work, right? So it's like, hey, get a guy who knows what the hell they're talking about. It's one day every 2 weeks.
Help you steer the ship correctly without costing you an arm and a leg. Yeah, for sure.
And so that they bring these guys in and they manage the teams, but they're managing 15 teams.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, but that means they have to have different CRMs, different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and where you can unify processes, it's very helpful for those guys, for sure.
So those guys can actually charge less and deliver more. Or they can have more clients at the same price, so their businesses can scale. But then also, for the businesses who are like, don't want that or can't afford that, they can actually start to like get the insights that person would intuitively have, which is very difficult to pass on unless it's in like a mentoring environment, because they're going to see those correlations, but it's not always that you can just point them out and go, okay, do this. You know?
Experience is definitely a thing.
Yeah, exactly. But it's really just being able to see patterns other people can't see.
Yeah.
You
raised an interesting point before around the box of Lego you called Salesforce. I think that's a really good area to kind of delve into a bit as well. HubSpot is, you could say it's a feature of, or they are guilty of, however you want to put it, but a lot of these systems sort of try to be all things to all people. And while that's great from a flexibility standpoint, it is exactly the issue you raised, where you sort of get handed this blank canvas. And there are underlying assumptions around that, around the level of sophistication that you have to even know what your setup should be, or even if you think you know what you want, what exists in levels of refinement above what you've currently attained that you would be able to embrace if you knew about them. And that's it's part of the reason why people spend millions of dollars on Salesforce implementations with these third-party like development teams and so on. But then you can have these enormous change management issues, and sometimes they overstep the mark of complexity, and then they don't get adopted properly. And there's just a lot of issues that exist in that.
I've never met someone who uses Salesforce that says we use it to its fullest capability and we're very happy with the outcomes.
Yeah,
and it does great things, we just don't use it.
Exactly, and I don't think anyone would say that Salesforce is not an incredibly powerful suite of products. But there is a sophistication delta quite often that is difficult to overcome. I think where we're philosophically different from that is working with a market leader like yourself. It's not about saying, well, we want to allow every permutation of how a sales team operates, and you can go and drag and build your own this, and that's not our objective. Ours is to say, here are some best practices. Here is a like framework that will give you a good feedback loop so that everything that you do results in a set of performance analytics so that you can make informed quantitative decisions around how to improve next week or tomorrow, whatever.
Yeah, which is brilliant because like right now, like I've got, one company, there's probably 9 people employed full time just to figure out like who's doing what, where, and why in the space of the calendars, because like it just can't be known. Because like, and I see it from a retrospective, to update it is like, it's a rigmarole. Like there's a whole thing. And if you're back to back, you just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Because you have to be in 2 or 3 different systems at once. And it's like, it just doesn't, there's no benefit. And then it's like, well, if you're not going to update, I'll have you do it in a day. Then they do it in a day, but they don't really like even remember at the end of the day.
You've got one foot out the door already, and and
you're just getting random data. So then like we're making decisions, because if you think you like, there's one account where it's like, it automatically registers as a show up if it's happened. If it doesn't get to otherwise, it's a show up. So if you've got a 15% close rate or whatever, and you assume your show up rate is 85, no idea. Because what if your show up rate is 60? That would make your close rate 25.
Yeah.
Right? Because like your close rate after people who show up.
Yeah.
And so it's like you actually can't, you're paralyzed with the decisions that you can make, because you're like, I'm aware this data is incorrect. So if I'm to make decisions based on it,
if you act on that, you could be breaking things.
It's either great or not.
Yeah.
Right? And so like it's not worth making a change. Because so in that business, like we're doing little tiny tweaks here and there based off the anecdotal stuff that we're seeing, but I don't use the data at all, because like I know there is no source of truth.
Yeah.
And so it's like putting that thing that just is going off multiple things. It's like, okay, cool. Now I know that is accurate. So it's like perfecto, because I can see like, oh, that hasn't been updated. Like there is no update there. So it's like, at least I could then, really remove all that data. Like if there's 15% of people that just aren't doing it, I'll just remove them from the fucking data set.
Yeah.
And then
but
let's
also
use the ones that we do.
Coming back to the why, in Revbase, the incentive for you to update the status of every meeting, for example, is that you get your personalized insights for how you personally can do better with your next round of calls. So it's not even...
It's just doing the work for them.
Yeah, and
like, give me
it's
this
not
one
even...
little thing and I'll give you all this.
Yeah, and so it's like, here are insights that pertain to across your team.
Yeah.
And here are things that pertain to you specifically. And so you, like, why would you not want to, if you're going to be there doing the job and you're trying to earn a buck, why would you not take that on board,
like, It's not like, when I do an end of day form, that all that's doing is giving my sales manager the ability to do their job. But it's not like that person is rarely going to then sit down with me.
Exactly.
And go, hey man, you shouldn't do calls Monday morning.
Yeah, exactly. So in this scenario, like, yes, your sales manager is getting the benefit of accurate data, but even if you look at it purely from a selfish, I'm putting time in for my own benefit standpoint, you're getting the insights out of it.
Yeah. That's a bit of a, I didn't know that bit. That's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. So yeah, and like, do you have any plans for the future of it? Have you got like a grand master plan, or you want to go into that?
Might be a little early to talk about that in too much detail, but suffice to say that I think, there seems to be this sort of notion that because so much money has been put towards building these various SaaS products that we sort of live in a world where it's sort of post-opportunity to build useful new tools.
Yeah.
That is absolutely not the case. I mean, if you just look at our ongoing conversations, there's just this very rich backlog of things of problems that still need to be solved. What we excel at is trying to figure out how do these stitch together into a single cohesive product, right? So Revbase, as we've been talking about it today, is really just the beginning of a suite of tools that will be rolled out for sales professionals and people who interact with them directly as well. Again, in the spirit of trying to reduce that sort of pain in the ass gap of, okay, some data's in that system and some's in that system, and just it exists in 1,000 different industries. We deal with it in software engineering. It's not unique to sales by any stretch, but it's an area that we've got some good experience at fixing. So that's what Revbase will continue to evolve into over time.
And I think it finally gives businesses the ability, like it's not many people can afford a good CTO, or can afford someone to come in, a data scientist to come in and build out these complex systems. And I tried out a data scientist that we had for a year to try and build out like a Integromat system that which is Google Looker Studio type stuff now, right? Like to kind of put everything together, and it was just like it's
a huge gamble.
It's a huge man. It was just a giant. I don't want to say waste of time, but it was just like it just never really kind of fit the bill, because it just still required like me to be so heavily involved in it, And then as things updated, it never really was able to do it. But I think that this provides someone with like some small tangible changes, because everyone wants these there's no silver bullet, doesn't work like that. But if you can make yourself 5% more efficient, 5% more efficient, by the end of a 6-month period, you are earning.
You're a different team. Radically different results, but through incremental data-driven improvement.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean I
think we just nailed it.
That's the pitch, right?
Yeah.
If we can.
Someone write that down.
Poetic, right? I think we'll put an expression of interest form.
Yeah, great.
Down below. So if you guys want to go down below and learn a bit more about this, we'll do an expression of interest. It'll be live very soon. It's sort of in stress testing mode at the moment. But yeah, we're going to be rolling it out across a couple of teams, and then launching it live very, very soon, probably very similar time as to when this comes out. So if you guys do want to learn more about this, go down below. We'll have some links there, and then from there we can give you a call and see if we can, if you want just a bit more insight, a bit more revenue, and you want to be able to make some small incremental data-driven decisions.
There you go. Rolls off the tongue.
It does. It's beautiful. All right.
Thanks very much.
Good stuff. Bye.